and somewhat of a media blackout that's happening as well around it, where genuinely people don't understand what's actually happening. They can see some parts of the atrocities, but they don't really know what is happening. And we'll get into that today, inshallah ta'ala. This the name itself, a teaching, it should tell you a little bit about what's actually happening. We are more dependent on the questions that you have versus what we are going to tell you. I was just speaking to the Shaikh Abdullah Hakim quick, about the fact that every time I go somewhere and I talk about Sudan, I begin with a speech and a talk, and I explain, and then the first question that comes to me immediately humbles me in the fact that I've just been over explaining things, because just the basics are not there. Just the bare basics are not there. So we're really hoping to do that, inshallah ta'ala, throughout this session, inshallah, and we are dependent on your questions. So ask questions. This is a good community here to ask questions. You can come closer, actually, because it's a little, I feel further than other times. But let's begin, inshallah, the program, inshallah, with a Quran recitation. Shaykh, our brother Hamza Abdullah, inshallah ta'ala, is going to begin with a Quran recitation, bi'idhnillah ta'ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور.
Barakallah fiqh, Brother Hamza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah, and guarantee you and grant you Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. We'll begin right away, inshallah, azza wa jal. Shaykh Abdullah Hakim quick is going to be our first speaker. He doesn't really need an introduction, but I just love being the one to introduce him. Shaykh Abdullah Hakim quick is one of our senior scholars here at the Islamic Institute of Toronto, and he's been with us for a long, long time. A genuine mentor to me, alhamdulillah, and a genuine guidance to this community, inshallah. Fadal, Shaykh.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala Sayyid al-Awwaleen wal Akhirin. Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, my beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, this is another opportunity for us to get together. And despite the fact that we are dealing with severe cold here in Toronto, we are online. So there are people who are online who will be benefiting from this program. And you will be able to review the program again online for some of the details that I'll be speaking to you about, but with a power projection, with a picture, you'd be able to understand it more. We're looking at the situation in the Sudan. And for many people, unfortunately even Muslims, it would be hard to find Sudan on the map. And it is one of the, I think, misunderstood, most misunderstood, underappreciated parts of the Muslim world. And it is of critical importance. And our tradition has been to connect the past to the present. So in order to really understand the gravity of the situation in the Sudan today, we need to know something about the history of this region. We can't just look at the world for the past 30 or 40 or 50 years or the past 200 years. We need to be able to understand the full picture. In the same way that we look at Canada, to understand what Canada is, you have to understand the history of the indigenous people, because the indigenous people lived here for thousands of years. The names that you are using are coming from the indigenous people. Similarly, in the Sudan itself, it is one of the most ancient civilizations in Africa, and I could actually dare to say in the world. And when we connect the past to the present for human experience, you will see that the ancient world, it still has an influence on us today. And even though we're at 2025, we're looking, but we can actually go back in the area of the Sudan, back into 3000, 4000 BC to understand the background. And that history actually affects the region, and it affects the rest of the world. But the Sudan as a country itself, if you look at the map, people know about Egypt and, of course, Libya. But if you look at the map, the Sudan is the huge country which is below Egypt. Today, Sudan has been broken into two parts. But previously, the Sudan was probably the largest country on the African continent. And on its borders, there are 9 countries that border on the Sudan. Right in the middle of it, and the essence of the Sudan, is the Nile River. It is the Nile Valley. And that Nile Valley civilization was one of the earliest civilizations in the world. The Sudan itself is special because it is where the White Nile meets the Blue Nile. And when you review this, you'll see, inshallah, the picture of what this actually looks like. But if you look at the map, you will see the Nile, and most people think that the Nile flows from north to south. It looks like that, but it doesn't. It actually flows from south north, because the mountains are in the south. And so it is from Ethiopia, Uganda, and the mountains in the south that the water is collected, and then it flows down toward the Mediterranean. So this huge flow, the Nile, is one of the largest rivers in the world. Maybe 3 or 4 rivers are the largest on earth. And so this water has been flowing historically, and human beings have been benefiting from the Nile from ancient times. And because the Sudan is sort of like a crossroads, to the north is Egypt and the Mediterranean, to the east is the Red Sea. So you have Arabia coming from that side. To the west is the Sahara Desert, which connects you to West Africa. To the south, then you are connected to Uganda, you are connected to Central Africa, and so it's like a crossroads civilization. And in terms of what it represents, it is a strategic, it's in a strategic position. And the struggles that are going on in the world today, especially that connects with Muslims, are not just civil wars between this tribe and that tribe, but what is going on, there is a struggle for strategic position. So the powers in the world, the colonial powers, realize that their strength is actually going down. It is waning. And so they are struggling for key places. And their intention, and this was actually discussed by generals in America and Western countries from back in the time of President Jimmy Carter, they actually looked at the Muslim world and certain countries that needed to be destabilized. And so they set about destabilizing certain countries. And we know now what happened in Libya. We know what happened in Iraq and in Syria. And so Sudan was one of those countries that needed to be destabilized because of its strategic position. Historically, and I want to take you back, way back, I want to take you back to 3,500 BC. Okay, so you're talking 5,000 years ago. There was a civilization on the Nile below what is now Egypt in a place called Nubia. The civilization was called Tasseti. Its capital was Qustul. And it was a great civilization, and historians recognize that the hieroglyphic language, that the pyramid building actually started with this civilization before Egypt. So this goes back 3,500 BC, is the civilization there in Tasseti. And this was somewhere in between what they call the first and the second cataract. You have to look at a map of the Nile itself and how it is flowing. And so they were able to develop a powerful written language. They were able to develop mathematics and physics. They built pyramids. And it is from there that the great pyramids in Egypt itself were developed. It did not come from the north. The propaganda or the fake news, the fake history that we've been taught is that the pyramids in Egypt actually came from the Greeks. So it came from the north, and they built the pyramids, and the civilization went from north to south. But that's not the reality. The reality is the civilization went from the south, it went to the north, and by the time it reached the north, they were able to develop pyramids that have never been duplicated up until today. So the Great Pyramid of Giza in what is now Egypt, that has 2,300,000 blocks of granite. No cement, perfect right angles. And I recently looked at a scientific review of the pyramids. And what they're saying is they cannot understand it. They cannot understand how African people had knowledge on this level at that time. Because the sides of the pyramid are perfect right angles. The granite inside of it, the blocks inside of it, sometimes weigh the weight of a truck. And it was carried for hundreds of kilometers and put into place. And these are the people who came from the area of the south, from Nubia, from that section, and they went north, and they developed the pyramids. Following this was another great dynasty, that is the 25th dynasty, and it is called the Kingdom of Kush. And these were the Nubian kings. So these people would live in what is now Aswan, southern Egypt, and then northern Sudan, in an area called Nubia. And their great kings in a place called Napata, they were able to develop an amazing society. And what is not known is that there are more pyramids in the Sudan than there is in Egypt. The difference is the pyramids in Egypt are larger in size. But in terms of the amount of the pyramids, in terms of the basic pyramid construction, it began with the ancient Sudanese, the ancient Nubian people. And so this civilization gives us the basis of Sudanese society. So in other words, the DNA of the people in this region is going back thousands of years, the ability to construct, the ability to use language, the ability to connect. And when Christianity was being spread, now we know about the story of Christianity. Remember the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when his companions were in difficulty, he sent them across into Al-Habasha. We know this story about Al-Habasha, right? Ethiopia. That was the first hijrah. But what is not known is that when the Christians were coming from the north, and they went south, okay, they developed a Christian kingdom in the Nubian area, Nopatia, Makora, Alodia. This was a great Christian civilization. And they were so powerful, they were so organized, that when Islam began to spread and the Umayyad dynasty had reached Egypt, and they were going across, the Umayyads, Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anh, they looked south. The Sudanese Christians were so powerful that they made a treaty with the Umayyads, and there was no conflict that went on between the Muslims and the Christians for hundreds of years. There was a treaty that was made because of the level of that civilization and that ability. And so finally, you could say, it starts in the 600s and it goes to the 1500s. Islam began to spread. And it mainly spread into the Sudan, not with warfare, but it began to spread with traders, merchants, intermarriage, scholars, mystics who were coming into this region. And this region, again, historically, there are Islamic historians who are looking at the history behind the Quran itself. We know that the story of Luqman, may Allah be pleased with him, the great knowledgeable person. You know the chapter called Luqman, how he spoke to his son? Luqman was in Nubia. He was in the Sudan. Also, there's a discussion that Musa alayhi salam, when Musa alayhi salam was by this Baha, it's like an ocean, and he forgot the fish, and there was a wise person, Al-Khidr, was with him. Many historians believe that this place with Al-Khidr and Musa was actually down there where the Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet. And for those who have the picture, and again, you know, you can review this, you will see the White Nile meeting the Blue Nile, and that's where the Quran in Surah Ar-Rahman is talking about Maraj al-Bahrain yaltaqiyan baynahuma barzakhun la yabghiyan. That the two oceans, and they use the word Baha coming for these rivers, the two oceans meet, in between is a barrier, and they do not cross each other. And if you look at the picture, when you review this, you will see, you can see the Blue Nile and the White Nile, right? And there's a barzakh, there's a barrier that goes in between. So Islam began to spread down into the Sudan, also across from Jeddah and across the merchants, taking it across into the Sudan itself. And great sultanates developed. There were powerful empires that developed, Islamic empires. So in the same way we had Ottoman empires, we had great civilizations in other parts of the Muslim world, there was also the Sultanate of Sinar. And if you want to see more, we have some pictures to show you something about Sinar, this great civilization. And this really was a crossroads that connected the Red Sea to the Sahara Desert, merchants coming across, then going from north into the south, going through Sinai, and it became one of the bases of Islamic education. So there were great scholars that also came out of that region, especially known for their abilities in fiqh and their ability in Arabic language. So the scholars and the mystics, there's something spiritual about this area, the character of the people. And one of the things that's known in the Muslim world about the Sudanese character of the people, and I had this opportunity myself when I studied in Medina, and leaving Canada and America and going to Medina and being there. This is way back in the 70s, and trying to find my way. I needed to learn Arabic language. All the different nations of the Muslim world were there. And amongst the Arabic-speaking people, the Sudanese had a reputation. It is a reputation of karam, of generosity. It is a reputation of connection. They were able to connect with other people, and they connected with myself and other students coming from the West, to the point where we even assumed Sudanese character and the Sudanese way of dress, and learned Arabic through the scholars that were coming. So this ability to connect, this generosity, remember that the Prophet ﷺ said that the essence of Islam, that he said, "Bu'ithtu li utammima husnul akhlaq." In the Muwatta, he said, "Verily, I have been sent in order to complete the best in character." So the essence of Islam is character. And because of the character of the people in this region, Islam spread west, it spread south. The connection was made. It's an amazing connection, which is of critical importance to our history. And that is something that may not be so well known, but it is something unique about the people living in that area. Another thing, because the area of the Sudan is so big, there are over 570 ethnic groups in the Sudan. 570 groups. There's also 70 different languages being spoken. This is a huge area in the Muslim world. There is Arabic, and there is Nubian, Nilotic, Beja, Fur, Nuba, West African languages. I was studying for my PhD in northern Nigeria. I studied the writings of a great Islamic scholar, Shaikh Uthman Danfodio Rahimahullah, and he was in this 18th century. These are the people of Hausa land. He was of the Fulani people, and they had a great jihad, a great resurgence of Islam in West Africa. And when the British came, finally, after the Muslims had ruled the area in northern Nigeria for 100 years, the descendants of Shaikh Uthman Danfodio Rahimahullah, they were told that if it appears things are going to fall apart, go east. Go east, because the Mahdi, because one of the great leaders before the end of time would appear in this area. And so they migrated east, and up until today, in the Sudan, there is a section of where the Hausa-speaking people, the Fulani-speaking people, who went there looking for the presence of a great Mahdi, are there in the Sudan. So the personality of the people in that region, the respect for scholars, the different traditions, this is something unique about this area. And that's probably part of the reason why the enemies of Allah want to destabilize this area. Because if there are people who can link Muslims, they can link Muslims of Arabic descent, African, from the Mediterranean, they can link people, it is dangerous. Another important issue about the Sudan is that it was around 1885 that the Europeans had a conference called the Berlin Conference. And there they divided up the world. So the French, the British, the German, Belgian, Italians, and they divided up the world, and they said, now we will go out using technology, using treachery, using divide and conquer, and we will conquer different sections of the world. And so they went out, and the British, they were assigned, they were given the area of Egypt and down toward the Sudan, of course in Nigeria, and the British, as you know, they were given India. And they considered India to be one of the crown jewel of the British Empire. But what is not projected and understood, that probably the first reaction against European colonialism that set the pace for all of the revolutions that was to come was around 1881 to 1898. And this was a reaction that came out of the Sudan. And the leader, whose name was Muhammad Ahmed, rahimahullah, was a Sudanese mystic and scholar, and he organized the people. And for the first time, the colonial forces are going out. They've got weapons, they've got organization, they're conquering different parts of the world. The French are taking North Africa. The Italians are trying to move on Ethiopia. The British want India. Okay, the Belgians, they want the Congo. The Dutch, Indonesia. How do the people react? Muhammad Ahmed, who's later known as the Mahdi, that he led a revolt and he defeated the British. He defeated the forces, the first time that a major colonial power like the British were actually defeated on the ground. And this set the pace for other great revolutions that would come after this, and it actually gave inspiration. Now this is right after the Berlin Conference. So this is an immediate reaction. Okay, and it's because of this that other parts of the Muslim world were able to have that energy. They could see an example of somebody who was actually responding to what was happening. So in a nutshell, the Sudan itself represents one of the ancient civilizations of the world. And the DNA, the knowledge, the ability of the people living in that region goes back to the ancient times on the Nile. It also represents a crossroads. It represents the love of the Sunnah. It represents the ability to connect. And I had the opportunity to be traveling on the African continent. I visited 20 African countries. And there in Africa and in other parts of the world, many places we went for dawah, we would meet Sudanese people, because they have that ability to connect. And they also have Arabic language. So they have roots in Africa, roots in, in the Arab world. And that is something special about that area. And I want to end, our presentation tonight, because, going back to Islamic History Month and many people bringing it back home to this part of the world. There's a very famous picture, and if you go online to review this, you'll see there's a picture of Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, with one of his most important teachers. And this was Shaikh Ahmed Hassan, who was a great Sudanese scholar. He was one of the main teachers of Malcolm X here in America. And you'll see with the spread of Islam in America, there are great scholars, Deuce Muhammad Ali, who was actually the one who taught Marcus Garvey, those who have been following, our history. You will see that many great Sudanese scholars have been involved in the spread of Islam up until today. So this is a strategic place. And the fact that there is an attempt to destabilize the Sudan is not by chance. It is by design. And so it is critical for us to understand what is happening in that region and also to assist in any possible way that we can to bring forward solid support to the people on the ground. So I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on the people who are suffering in the Sudan. It is considered to be the greatest humanitarian crisis on earth today. Okay, so I want to leave you with this as we look at the present situation there in the Sudan. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah. Kafayt wa wafayt. You have certainly sufficed. I guess my role is just kind of to explain a little bit of what's happening today, inshallah. Shaykh Abdullah has provided a little bit of historical context of what's happening in Sudan. So I've been doing a lot of these talks, and just like I said at the intro, I feel like every time I speak to a group of people, I over-explain things, and then I immediately I get humbled by what people don't know. And that just kind of brings me back to the basics of what's actually happening in Sudan. So maybe I'll throw some context to it. So in Sudan right now, the United Nations is estimating a number of 150,000 people who have died as a direct result of the war. Just a couple of days ago, actually, in the UK Parliament, there was some UN testimony, and they're talking about the estimation of about 60,000 people who have been killed just in Al-Fashir since October the 27th and the 28th, when Al-Fashir itself was attacked. So I know these numbers are crazy. They're just really, really crazy numbers, and they seem like they're unreal, especially when we see how the community and the rest of the world, for instance, becomes really outraged when we just talk about much smaller numbers of death in other countries, right? And it's not the time, obviously, to compare between atrocities. I don't think human suffering needs to be compared at all. This is not the way that it is. But I do want to highlight the fact that these numbers are just absolutely staggering compared to anything else that is happening on the face of the earth. So we talk about 150,000 people. This was the estimate before Al-Fashir, plus 60,000 people that have just passed, that have just been killed that time. We're talking about 17 million people who have lost their homes. I know people refer to them as displaced, internally displaced, or people who are refugees, but these are people who have lost their homes for good, they have no place to return to. And it's helpful for you to try to place yourself in their place, right? To be able to understand this. Like, imagine a home that you've worked for all your life, and you just lose it, and there's no hope of return. There is just literally no hope of return at this moment here. The United Nations is also estimating a number of between 17 to 19 million students, school-age kids, who have been out of school for the past 3 years, and they name it the largest education shutdown also on the face of the earth. So these are really crazy numbers if you think about them. But I always repeat this sentence when I say, like, numbers don't cry. They don't really shed a tear. Numbers don't really bury children, right? Humans do. And maybe I'll share a couple of stories before I tell you what's actually happening about this. You know, there is a story of, and these are stories that are reported by a lot of organizations, but these ones that I'm mentioning themselves, they're reported by Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders. So there's a story of, a story of a young girl named Taysir, for instance, and Taysir is, she tells a story of the fact that as she's actually fleeing from her home, the RSF, the Janjaweed, catch up to her and her mom as they're running, and they end up running over her mother with their vehicle. And as her mother is laying there dead, they take turns in raping her. Taysir was 13 years old, and she gave birth, actually, to to a child that was a result of this rape itself in Camp Tawila. Camp Tawila is a camp that is very close to Al-Fashir. And again, I mentioned these just like these stories, and I'm telling you, there is millions of them. There's thousands of them that we keep mentioning. Also, you know, a story that is close to me is a story of a gentleman in Sudan, and just when Khartoum itself just started to get bombed, he refused to leave his house, and he decided to go and find some sort of refuge in a local masjid, and that's where a lot of people kind of went to. But he was diabetic, and he faced this I guess really a diabetes coma, and the people who were hiding with him in the masjid itself, they watch him die, not being able to do anything about it. That guy specifically was a close family member to my wife. He was directly her uncle, her mother's brother. And the sad situation about him is that we were on the phone with him as he's going through these atrocities, and we were trying to connect with him, and the last moments when he's literally dying, people in the masjid themselves were answering his phone, and they were giving us updates about him. And millions of these stories are happening. And I don't know how to explain it in any way except for that this war here is not a natural disaster. It is something that is man-made. It is something that we as human beings are causing. And we can stop it. But there is no political will for this. There is just genuinely no political will and no way out of it at this moment. So I guess let me go back to the history of Sudan. Sudan is no stranger to civil wars, and Shaykh Abdullah touched up a little bit on this about it. But every single civil war that's happened in Sudan, and the first one that started since 1955, this was the year before the British actually left Sudan. Every one of these wars has been directly related to how colonialism has treated Sudan as a country, how it has selected and chosen specific people over other people within the Sudan and treated them differently than other people, and how they made it into a country that should have been, because of how ethnically diverse it is, into really a powerhouse, but because of the way that they just taught our elite system, the nukhba, as we call it in Sudan, to behave differently towards one another. How we have just basically, they set us up as a country for failure in how we can manage diversity. And that's just the case all around. Every single war that started in Sudan is a direct result of how the treatment of Sudanese people has been. And I know it's a long time, and I get people who always say to me, come on, brother, it's been such a long time, like, why haven't you guys learned? And it is a question I ask myself all the time. But I always want to go back to the basics of how it's happening, okay? Sudan was known to be the basket of the whole world in terms of the actual food that can grow. I can give you stories. I can give you some really, anybody Sudanese here? Anybody Sudanese here? Nobody Sudanese here? This is actually one of the craziest things that I always tell people, they don't believe it. But I used to live in Medani, in Al Jazeera. And in Medani, we were like warned, like by our grandparents and so on, not to throw fruit seeds after we finish eating them, because they would grow immediately and they would just cause like issues in the house, right? So like if you just finished eating a mango, you're not supposed to throw it out. You're supposed to like hold it somewhere, because if you throw it somewhere, you'll come back within a couple of weeks and it will grow, and it'll grow in the wrong place and it will cause problems, and it will get really, really big. So in my house, we had mango trees, we had orange trees, we had a lot of lemon trees, we had I don't actually remember a time when there is anything that we need to actually purchase from outside of the house. And we weren't like farmers. Like that wasn't like the farmer life. It was just a normal, regular life. My dad was an actual, he was an employee of the government. And so my mom was a high school principal. So that wasn't at all like the life of farmers. So that's the kind of fertile country that Sudan is. And that makes it what it is right now. If we talk about the external influence, for instance, I'll talk about this a little bit towards the end of it. But that's a part of why everybody wanted a part of Sudan. The British people and everyone else. To the point where we talk about Al Jazeera scheme, for instance. I don't know if you heard of it. You can Google this here. But the Jazeera scheme was one of the largest. It's 1 million acres of naturally fertile, and it doesn't need anything. That just literally, the river runs over the scheme once a year, and you can plant anything you want for the rest of the year. Like it's a crazy system. Like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just gives you things that you just cannot believe about it, and you don't imagine it. So it is that type of a beautiful country. And I also want to mention something about the Sudanese people that Shaykh Abdullah has kind of referred to a little bit. Sudan is such a diverse country that, like, within one city, you'll find hundreds of ethnic groups and sometimes tens of like different languages that are spoken, right? Alongside the Arabic. But the one thing that always made Sudanese people so unique everywhere. I've lived abroad as well, and the moment I say I'm Sudanese, I get special treatment. When I lived in the UAE, if I say I'm Sudanese, I get special treatment. When I lived in Saudi Arabia, when I say I'm Sudanese, I get special treatment. And I felt like people were just lying to me, like you know, they're just like, you guys, we just love you guys, and so on. But then, after a little bit of time of studying this, I'm realizing that so many of the generations of people my age right now have had professors and teachers who were Sudanese people all over the Middle East, right? And so that left a good taste in the mouth of people when they actually speak to Sudanese people. And generosity is a thing that Shaykh Abdullah has spoken about. I didn't inherit that. I try, but you know, one of the things that they say in Sudan, don't compliment. This is a genuine thing. Don't compliment anyone on anything that they have on. They will take it off and give it to you and walk away. This is a real thing. It's happened to me many times where I just, hey, this is, you know, a beautiful imma, right? This actually imma was given to me by someone who I just complimented him on it. And they just take it off, and it's a genuine thing, to the point where people actually worry and they warn you. When you go into Sudan, one of the cultural things, don't compliment people on things. They'll take off their shoes and they'll give them to you, and they'll walk home barefooted. And, you know, some people say it's stupidity, but I always say it's just genuineness in the way that human beings love to actually serve one another. A story I'll tell is that when I visited Sudan, I'm from Madani, but outside of Madani there is the smaller villages. One of them is called Rufa'a, and that's where my grandfather used to live. My grandfather, who's the brother of my main grandfather. And there is no addresses, so you go there, and when you arrive to the village, you ask them, you say to them, hey, where is so-and-so-on's house? That's how you get there. So we drove and we got to, you know, the main area, me and my brother, and I've told the story before, but it's just such a, like, I live it every time. And when we arrived at in the village, the first person we asked, we said to him, where's the house of so-and-so on? He said, oh, he used a Sudanese word, which is called, he said, wasaltatab. Wasaltatab means you have arrived. Like, you're here, you got to the house, to the person's house. So I was like, perfect, we're here. Okay, so where's the house? And so the guy literally gets in the car with us, and he goes and tells us right, left, right, left, right, left. Not the first house in the village. He takes us deep inside the actual village and stuff, and here's the house, and he opens the door, and come on in, you're welcome, you're alpha, you know, we say in Sudanese, hababa kalif, which is you are 1,000 times welcome. And we went inside, and we got hibiscus tea, and we got normal tea, and we got leguemat, and we got like all the kinds of food and everything else. And a half an hour passes, and we don't see our grandfather, so we don't really know where he is. Well, my brother's like, yo, let's ask these guys what's going on. We're just like, we're Canadians. We're coming from Canada. Like, we don't know how to do this in any way. So my brother asks him, he's like, where's our grandfather, right? And he's like, yeah, we sent for him to come. So we're like, is he not live here? And I was like, no, 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 but we're bringing him. So they actually sent like this cart that I literally pulled by a donkey to go get our grandfather from like at the end of the road to bring him back. Now when he came, we asked him like, whose house is he? He's like, I don't really know them. They're not really close to us. But this is the way it works here. If you visit anyone in the village, they'll literally welcome you like you have arrived home, and they'll slaughter animals for you, and they'll feed you, and and they refuse to let us go. They like, khalas, we spent the day there. Instead, my grandfather brought his family to the house, and this is how they fight over being generous and being honorable. And you can Google right now, for instance, Ramadan in Sudan. This is a document that was made by Al Jazeera, where in Sudan, they actually stop cars during Ramadan, right before iftar time. They also warn you, they say to you, don't leave your house because you'll get stopped and you'll get forced to eat iftar at someone's house. It's not like a nice, generous thing. It's actually really violent. Like you can't say no. They'll put like rocks in front of the cars, and they'll like it's crazy. It is an absolute like you feel like you're being robbed, but they just want to feed you. They want to actually provide you with this kind of generosity, and that's the type of people, honestly, that Sudanese people are. And you don't meet many of them. Unfortunately, like living so far away in the West here, Sudanese people don't like leaving Sudan, except for those like us who have been forced out of it. So let me talk a little bit about, I guess, what's happening in Sudan itself. So in 2018, 2019, Sudan did something, Sudanese people actually rather, went through a very unique experience of having a revolution. This revolution wasn't the first one for Sudan. It's not, Sudan is known for revolutions. The revolution is not like the other ones in the Arab worlds. Revolutions that are genuinely led by the youth. This 2018, 2019, it was strictly a youth-based revolution, and they were able to accomplish something that's really, really unique. They fought against injustices. They were fighting against dhulm. They were fighting against, and really their chants were hurriya, salam, wa adala, which is all they were asking for was just freedom, peace, and justice. And those are the three things that they called for throughout the actual revolution itself. And they were able to remove this general who ruled Sudan for more than 30 years. He's literally the reason why I left Sudan. My father was imprisoned by this guy and beaten and gone through a difficult time for him. And despite him not wanting to leave, he was actually forced to leave because he just wasn't able to live in Sudan at that time. But that revolution kind of showed us that the fact that you can actually remove such atrocities, that you're able to actually move forward and become a country that is moving towards democracy. I know the word democracy is a little problematic for many of us, but it is the option that everyone was seeking for. They actually wanted civilian rule. They did not want to be ruled by generals. That's just not a thing that they were hoping for. So after removing this system, a small transitional government came to kind of rule. It was supposed to be transitional. It wasn't good. It wasn't perfect. It was flawed for sure. I'm not going to deny this. But it was transitional, and it was supposed to be the option for moving forward. And it failed at a lot of things. But what it has succeeded at is the fact that it actually planted the seed of, you know, the three things that people were chanting for, which is the hurriya, salam, wa adala. People start to see freedom. People start to actually see some sort of justice being applied. Sudan was starting to be removed from one of the sanctioned countries of the world. So people felt like there was some sort of freedom that was happening. However, a military coup happened in 2019 to remove that government. And it went back to the same institution that was ruling before this revolution. It went back to the actual army itself. Now, I don't want to say anything that makes people upset. Now in Sudan, because of the war, if you speak against the army, you're in trouble, right? The army is not perfect. It's not at all. It is not the #1 option for Sudanese people, but it's the only institution at this moment that can actually save Sudan, because it is the only institution that actually exists. So I want you guys to be aware of this before we ask questions about why are people fighting and why people with the army versus the RSF or the Janjaweed and so on, when I'm going to get to that point, right? But the army is it's the only place, the only institution right now that can rule, because it's the only one that actually exists with some sort of structure, okay? They're making lots of mistakes, they're doing a lot of wrong things, but there's no other option beside them. And that's why the Sudanese people are just basically kind of backing them up for the time being, okay? When this military coup happened, Sudan became, like, they killed the hope, basically. They killed the hope of all the youth. They killed the hope of this revolution moving forward. And they started fighting amongst them. The army itself had militias that they hired themselves because it was stretched thin. Sudan, just like I said to you, Sudan has been going through war since 1955. So by this time, they had established militias in different parts of the actual country itself. One of these militias was the RSF, which is the Rapid Support Forces. They used to be known as the Janjaweed back in 2003, 2002. They did some crazy atrocities back in those days. They were responsible for protecting the borders alongside Darfur. If you remember 2003, 2004, you guys look way too young for 2003, 2004. But remember George Clooney was saying all these crazy things about Darfur. He was saying, you know, the Arabs are killing Africans and all of these, and Angelina Jolie and all these white people were talking about Sudan all of a sudden. So there was a lot of attention happening. By the way, I've been looking for them since recently. I can't find these guys, but anyways. That was their issue that was happening back in those days. When the Janjaweed became an official part of the actual army itself, they were given a clause within the actual constitution itself in Sudan that they don't have to report to the main general of the army. So essentially, they established two armies in one country, which is a terrible thing. Nobody ever wants to do that. It was the stupidest thing to ever do, but they thought that this is the only way for them to be able to sit together in one table, right? And then the idea was we need to combine all of these armies, militias and the main army, into one actual forces, right? So they can basically support this move towards democracy. This was the whole idea. The disagreement happened between these two large group factions in the actual timeline. Just so you know, they fought over everything, but the major issue here was the fact that the army itself said the RSF has to be included within the major army within 2 years. The RSF said 10 years. 10 years is ridiculous. I don't know how long it takes for two parts of the army to come into two of them. The Sudanese people thought 2 years was too long, but they trusted those who are experts to know what's happening, right? And that's how the clashes actually began. Now, both sides deny the fact that they started the war, that they shot the first bullet. I actually was. This was in Ramadan, April 15th. If you follow me at all, I've had this like longing of going back home since I turned 40. And I've just been wanting to do everything I can to just leave this country and go home. I've been wanting to do everything I can. So now, in Ramadan, as I'm waiting for Fajr, what I do is I actually just watch lives from Sudan. This is what I do. So in Ramadan, I'm just waiting for Fajr. And on the 15th, I remember this. And it's a friend of mine who actually has his phone, and he was talking to me and showing me around. And I actually witnessed the first bullet of the actual war itself, because literally that was the space that he was in, was the area where that first bullet came about, where a sniper actually literally just shot at the area where they were at. And that's how the war started. The RSF, the Janjaweed, they are a militia. They are small, they are fast, and they are quick, and they are, again, as a militia, they're not ruled by rules and regulations. They didn't go to the military college, if you call them that way, right? So they were able to actually spread very, very quickly in major cities and hide in people's homes. That was their ammo. And what they would do, for instance, is that they would punish the people. They would literally punish the people that they go into their homes. So Killing of the elderly was the norm. Raping of women. The UN has actually, the numbers are crazy when it comes to rape. That from infants to grandmothers, this is the type of people that they actually are, right? And they don't do this for sexual desires. It's actually a means, what they call in Sudanese, they call it, to break the eye of the person, or to just basically kind of like downgrade you, in a sense, for you now to submit, to say, okay, well, these guys have a bigger power than me, and so on. And what they would do is they would literally make the men of the home watch their daughters and children and mothers and so on being raped. It's really, really disgusting type of war that's happening. And that's why this war specifically is quite problematic, is that even though it's a war between two different generals, the main target, both sides, by the way, just so you know, punish the other ones by killing civilians and punishing civilians. This is their ammo. They think that by punishing civilians, that the civilians are going to uprise and they're going to say, okay, fine, we're on your side. And this is the way that it is, that they have gone all the way through it. Again, I always say both sides have committed atrocities. This is what the UN has said. I haven't been to Sudan, so all I'm seeing at this moment here is actually the RSF documenting themselves committing these atrocities. I'm sure you've seen the footage that's coming out of Al-Fashir. It is absolutely terrible, absolutely disgusting. But there are also documented atrocities that have happened also on behalf of the SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces. But again, I'll come back to this point here because I want you to understand this. The Sudanese people are still on the side of the Sudanese Armed Forces because, again, it's an institution. So their hope is that after the war ends, we're at least going to be able to hold them accountable. There are still judges who work for the army. There's still a military police that works for the army. There is still some sort of investigation units that work for the army. That doesn't exist on the side of the RSF. They are a militia. They don't actually have a structure like that at all. And therefore, the problem is when they commit a crime, they're more likely to get away with it than the army. Does this make sense so far? I'm talking completely out of everybody's league. Nobody's responding to me. Okay, because I want you to understand, because the question that always comes to me for people is like, why, who are these people, which side are they on? And I say this openly, and I always get criticized for it because I don't live in Sudan, so I don't really care for the criticism. But the idea here is that the Sudanese people don't have love for neither side. Okay, but they will support the army, the actual official army, because it is the only institution that is right now existing in Sudan, standing up on its legs, that's able to do anything at all. Otherwise, it's a mess without them, if that makes any sense for you, okay? All right, so the army is stronger, is bigger, is more powerful, but the RSF is able to actually fight inside cities, and the army cannot. Army is made to blow up places. The army is made to blow up big spaces, to blow up big buildings. They don't have small vehicles. They have planes, and they have tanks. And the RSF has small little box, like what we call like trucks, that they basically mount a gun on top of it, and then they travel really, really fast with it. And that has been the imbalance between the two of them. It was expected that the army can actually get rid of the RSF in terms of numbers within a week or so on, but the RSF they've basically proven the fact that they're really quite nimble. They're able to actually move around inside the homes, hide amongst people, and the army has expressed concern over the killing of civilians if they actually use their big weapons. I'm just giving you guys what's being said, not my opinion, because if I give you my opinion, you're not going to be happy, okay? So that's kind of how it is right now for the time being. So it's lasted this long of a time. And the RSF was able to actually defeat the army for quite some time until help came and the RSF started to kind of retreat and move towards the west. Remember, I was saying to you, Darfur is in the west. That was the actual strong that's a strong really hold that they actually have is over Darfur itself. So now they are back in Darfur itself. But again, just within the last couple of days, They were able to move towards Baba Nusa. They were able to move towards the eastern part of Kordofan, northern Kordofan, and so on. And these are, again, they punish the city's civilians. The army, when it retreats, it moves everything with it. And so when the RSF comes into a city, they don't find the army. So who do they kill? That's a question for you guys. The people, just the civilians. That's really literally what's been happening right now. So Al-Fashir has been a devastating moment for this war itself, even though there's been a lot of devastating moments before. The massacre of Durman, the massacre of Khartoum, the massacre of Madani. Like now, just like every single city, basically, there's a massacre that's happening that we can just name and say that that was the epicenter of the actual the conflict itself, or the biggest genocide that's happened. But the biggest issue right now, or the biggest city right now that's been really punished is Al-Fashir. I've spoken about Al-Fashir here before in the last time I gave khutbah. And I think it's important for people to understand the fact that this Al-Fashir that has been tied to death, to wars, and to atrocities, for Muslims themselves to actually understand the fact that Al-Fashir as a city is a city that's quite relevant to you as Muslims. It is the city that used to be ruled by Muhammad Ali Dinar. He was the last of the Salatin of Al-Fashir. He was a person that was responsible for sending the Kiswa of Al-Kaaba when the British Empire denied Egypt from being able to send it for more than 10 fame, which is basically like the purse of the two holy sites. And in it, he sends money, food, and all kinds of goodness, right, to the people of the Hijaz. And this is, I don't know if you guys want to guess when this was happening. Because I want to know, as Muslims, what do we know about this? How long ago do you guys think this happened? Like 1700s, 1600s? 1400s? Nobody knows? Yeah, so Sultan al-Dinar was actually killed in 1916. So very, very recent. This is not really too long of a time. But this also shows us that it's a real problem for us. We as Muslims, we don't really recognize these big, huge spaces that have contributed to Muslims throughout history, right? But we have had this approach of looking at Islam from an Arab-centric perspective, I guess. I don't know, the Shaykh can correct me on this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound insulting, but I think that this is the way that we sometimes look at the contributions of Arab countries or lighter-skinned Muslims as more important than darker-skinned Muslims. And I hope, I'm just guessing here, Sheikh. I don't know if Sheikh Abdullah has made the research on this, so he should probably do it. But it's what I see right now. And it's what I see right now also as we as Sudanese people are going through these atrocities. I am telling you right now, the Sudanese community is quite upset and quite concerned with how the Muslim community is treating them and how they're looking at this atrocity as well. This is a genuine discussion that's happening within the Sudanese community. They feel left alone, and they feel like they have, that they're not worthy of people's concern. And again, this is not new to the Muslim community. I think it's important for us to highlight our flaws and where we can fix things so we can move forward. So when I give these critiques, my brothers, and respect this, I give them out of love. I give them because I want us to do better. It's not because I want to point out anything else, right? But I go back to how fundraising was also quite problematic in the early 1990s, when also we were doing everything we can to collect money for Somalia, for instance, and those efforts seemed really, really, really weak compared to any lighter-skinned Muslims when an issue happens to any lighter-skinned Muslims. And again, I use these, I'm talking loosely here, inshallah, but these are trends that we're seeing them throughout the Muslim community as well. I don't know, I've gone all over the place for you guys. I'm hoping that your questions can guide the rest of the discussion that we have. Here's where we are. Is there any questions? Yes. Online? Oh, Allahu Akbar. All right. Yeah, I'm worried. Is it okay? Yeah? You've heard the question. Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. So the question here is, what is the UAE's role in what's happening in Sudan right now? And this is a really important question. The reason why I'm not saying anything here, the Islamic Institute of Toronto is a charity, is a charitable organization, so I'm not certain where the legalities fall in terms of how this works out. But the United Arab Emirates is directly funding the actual genocide that's happening in Sudan right now. I don't think they're hiding it. They're denying it. They're not hiding it, which are completely two different things, because the flight records are shown that they're flying weapons from their countries. They're going through to Uganda and then straight to Chad, or to Somalia and then straight to Chad. And that's just a way for them to be able to kind of mix and match all of these things. But we do have also reports of a Canadian company that makes armors. It's called Straight. It operates out of Ash-Sharqa or Ajman, one of the two places. This is still one of the Emirates of the Emirates. So they're making these armored vehicles. These armored vehicles were seen, we were videotaped, and they were photographed. The Sudanese community has actually sent these pictures and images to the Prime Minister's office, telling him that Canada is actually directly complicit in this as well. We know that the UAE has huge investments in Sudan, and they are worried about their investments in Sudan, so they are directly involved. They believe that the RSF will allow them to have more direct and more control over what's, the future of Sudan and how they're actually able to get control over Sudan. Moreover, and I think this is a really important part of it, the United Arab Emirates has always been on the side of anti-political Islam all throughout the world. This is their position. Okay, this is not a position that they're hiding. It's a position that they're holding in the Palestinian conflict. It's a position that they're holding in the Libyan conflict. It is a position that they're holding in the Egyptian conflict. So, like, if you look at every single time that they're actually involved in any other country, they always go with the party, the political party that is anti-Islam. They don't like political Islam. It's not a thing for them. That's their business. But they shouldn't shove it down our throats in other countries. So, yeah, they're directly involved. I hope that answers that question. Nobody's hiding it. I will never get a visa to the UAE. I've already denied, and I don't want to go. So, I want to actually fix this a little bit. I worked in the UAE. I have met no one, honestly, who is nothing, such respectful people and such beautiful people as a people, right? As a nationals, and I've always been treated with so much respect in that country that at times I genuinely don't understand where the rulers are from. They're just not from that country, because I've never ever been disrespected or treated in any way other than good in the UAE by their people. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the Emiratis, man, as a people. Whew, I fixed it, but it's true. Is that it? Okay. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you guys, inshallah, and grant you guys Jannah. So the lack of questions means that nobody understood anything. Oh. Yes? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the issue with Sudan right now is that honestly, the call to action is donations at this moment here. It's the only thing that's available and that's possible for us. The Islamic Institute of Toronto is collecting funds that they can send to Sudan through various organizations. So if you speak to the management of this masjid here and tell them I want this money to go towards Sudan, I am certain they'll find a way for you to be able to give it to them. But I think Sudanese people are mostly talking about honestly, right now, at this moment here, is sharing their stories and talking to people and spreading the actual concerns that they actually have. This is a war that is legitimately not complicated to stop. Everyone I speak to, they always say, this is not a hard war to stop. Cut off the funding today, within 48 hours. Sudan doesn't produce armor, like it doesn't produce like weapons. Right, at the infrastructure. So everything is coming in from the outside. And within 48 hours of the oil stopping, coming through to Sudan, through Libya, for instance, the war will stop. We know this for a fact. The moment the UAE stops funding it, the war will actually stop immediately. So that can only happen if there is some sort of pressure on these governments to do so. And that doesn't happen unless people actually know the atrocities that are happening and that are being committed. So the sharing of our stories is something that really, really important. It is really, really essential. I don't know why people shy away from it. So fundraising, sharing the actual stories themselves. And I'll say something to you that I'll add to this as well. You know, when the war started in Sudan, I was really surprised at the lack, and this is a personal thing, but then I also shared it with other Sudanese people, and this came across, at the lack of phone calls that came to me personally to check on me. I was really surprised about this because I remember when war started anywhere else, like I have a Ukrainian friend. When the war started in his country, I actually checked up on him immediately. That was my thought. Right? Like I checked on him, I said, you know, what's happening? Is everything okay? Where's your family? So on and so forth. And this happens all across for all my Palestinian friends, for anyone that I know the moment I have. But it was really, really surprising to me that I didn't get any, not from the closer ones, right? But from the community. And I speak in the community, and I actually, I'm a little bit of a public figure, right? So I assumed that I would get more concerning calls, right? And then I shared this with other community members, and I said, yeah, we're really surprised that we haven't been checked on at all by our community, right? My wife said the same thing when I met with other Sudanese communities. This is something that I've said. So I give these critiques, guys, as honestly as love, because I just genuinely want you to understand this is how the community itself is actually feeling and they're going through. I know that Gaza is a major thing that is happening in the world, but I hate comparing between the two different situations because every single blood of a Muslim is sacred, right? Like there's no difference between them, right? And when we compare the atrocities, we start to realize that no, the numbers here really outweigh anything else that's happening, but the reaction is just really minimized. So, and again, if I'm not seeing my war in the news and I'm not seeing being talked about in the masjid and I'm not getting phone calls from my community members, what am I supposed to think? Like that's just genuinely, I want you to put you in that kind of a position, right? I hope that makes sense, if that's helpful. Good? Should I kill it? Yes? Okay. The question is how come the coverage of Sudan is not the same as Gaza? I don't know if you guys know, actually I teach media. I'm a graduate of media studies, and actually my subhanAllah, my graduation paper was about the coverage of Muslims post-September 11th. So this is what I study. And it's really, really funny to me because I know why. And then I just try to fight it in my head, right? Number one, the coverage is really, really low because Sudan doesn't have a huge cultural impact on the rest of the world. right? This is not a thing, like you don't, I don't know, name a Sudanese actress or actor or singer. Can you? Name a Sudanese president. Name any Sudanese president. So that's kind of how it works out to be. But then if I say to you, listen, name a Palestinian president, you'll name them, right? That's the case that it works. Again, comparing Sudan and Gaza is really a difficult thing to do and strange, because Gaza, here's the thing, I don't want to separate Gaza from Palestine, okay? Palestine is something that has been happening since 1948, right? And it is a very clear-cut issue here, right? We have an aggressor and someone who's being oppressed. And I applaud the Palestinian people, right, on the fact that I actually think they are able to build a narrative that is very simple for people to actually understand, and they practice it, and they're really good at it. Sudanese people are not like that, because again, the wars is not something that we are expecting other people to help us out with. This wasn't an expectation that we actually have. And oftentimes Sudanese people, this is actually one of the things that Sheikh Idris said, this is one of my teachers. He always used to say, the biggest problem with Sudanese people is the Sufism that comes in them. They don't complain about things. They will never tell you something is wrong with me in the home. And this was actually, he said this a long time ago, by the way, but this was a failure of a television program that I was working on in Sudan. This is a very funny thing. We're supposed to go and help people in Sudan. This was before the war, before the actual revolution itself. And we go to people's homes who are like, they're living difficult. And you go to their homes and he's like, mother, to this elderly, be like, how are things going with you? What kind of help do you need? And she would say, Alhamdulillah, I am wonderful. I'm doing great. Like, there's nothing that I need. I am just amazing. You want me to give you something? You want me to give you some tea? And she's clearly going through a difficult time. So, idea of being able to speak and to generate these kind of narrative, I guess. And that's just kind of honestly my assessment as well, right? So the number one is, again, cultural products. Sudan does not, if a war happens in Sudan today, for instance, it's not going to cut off a huge oil field from the rest of the world. It's not going to cut off any sort of food from them. It's not going to cut off anything else as such, right? Yes? You tell me when to stop, brother. I'm okay with whenever you're ready. Before Fajr tomorrow, inshallah. Go ahead, sister. Are you a Marathi? Oh, okay. I think it's really important. I guess the question here is, how do we approach these kind of conversations with Emirati family members and so on? I think it's really important for us to differentiate and to genuinely separate between the people and the governments in any single discussion, right? Like, I don't think the Emirates, for instance, is more complicit in that war than Canada is. I live here. I genuinely actually believe Canada is more complicit than the UAE, but I live here. I'm forced by the CRA to pay taxes. So, and I can't leave, so I don't have a choice over it. So when we talk to people, and by the way, this is all across the board, talk to people with love, talk to people, explain to them the actual human cost of what's actually happening. I'm not asking anyone to leave the UAE. I'm not asking, I have family members who live there. I have cousins who live there who now no longer talk to me because of my speech against the UAE. And again, I'm speaking to them against an actual government, not as a people. And I know the danger of what happens when you speak against anything in a lot of countries, right? Even in Sudan, for instance. Jail is not a fun place in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Sudan, in these countries. It's not a good place to be for anyone, and I don't wish it upon anybody else. But what I always tell Muslims is that if you have the choice, if you have the option, if you live in Canada here, you live in the USA, you live in the UK, you live anywhere else, don't go to the UAE and spend money. Like that money is directly going to kill my people. That's a really difficult thing for me to have as a conversation. I don't want to be nice about it either. Like it's a life and death situation. If you go there for business and you're stuck for business, don't post your pictures telling me, hey, this is the beautifulest place and so on. Have some shame about this. As a Muslim, I think you should hide your sins. I genuinely think it's sinful for us to go spend money in these countries where they're genuinely funding genocides. Even this country, by the way, I think it's quite, if you don't have a choice, then you shouldn't be a part of it, right? So approach people with love. Talk to them about the real consequences, the human consequences of what's actually happening. I tell the sisters to avoid buying gold from the UAE. That is Sudanese gold. That is Sudanese blood gold. That is directly involved in the actual funding of this genocide. Don't do it. There is no reason for it. There is plenty of gold all over the world if that's your thing to do. But that's how I would approach it. Just honestly, genuine, a little bit of and being on the we don't care. You know, the believers with the haqq, my brothers and respected sisters. Barakallah. You have a question? The Arab League and so on. Is that what your question is? Yeah, it's been really weak. It's been really weak. So Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran, for instance, we know that they do provide some sort of support for the SAF, the actual Sudanese armed forces. It's very, very weak. The UAE pocket is really, really deep. Like if I mention those three countries, they're not I mean, Saudi Arabia is, but they're just not spending that kind of money to actually support these, and they don't want to be blatant about it. These are countries that are actually a bit more shameful, I think, than the UAE is about this actual specific situation, right? So they're not showing that much money. The African Union has been condemning the atrocities. The UN has been condemning the atrocities, and condemnation is all across the world, alhamdulillah. We're just not seeing any sort of actions, especially because it's quite dangerous. Like today, for instance, I don't know if you heard the news or not, today the RSF actually bombed a UN location in near Al-Fashir, killing, I believe, 8 Bangladeshi UN forces, members of the UN forces, and it's terrible. I think out of the 8 of them, there was 3 of them that were women that were literally just doing humanitarian work, trying to save. So it's difficult for any country to commit themselves to go to a place where there's just no law. It's lawless. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I guess really as Canadians, this is the last thing I'll say to you. I'm really sorry. I do not mean to take this long at all. But this is a thing. Like right now, for instance, our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, just came back from the UAE with a $70 billion promise. They call commitment, what we call a promise. You know how people in fundraising, they commit to things and they pay and they don't pay. This is basically what they did to him. But we sent him messages. I actually directly spoke to his office when we were visiting the Prime Minister's, the Ottawa, and we showed them pictures. We showed them, these are Canadian weapons being used in Sudan right now to kill Sudanese people. At the same time, and this is just to add to it, so you know what Sudanese Canadians are going through right now, the family reunification program for the Sudanese community that are supposed to be brought here, for instance, is a sham. They played us. The Canadian government literally played Sudanese people, telling them that we're going to bring your family members here, and they lied. They lied. Out of the 5,000 applications, less than 3,000 people have arrived up to date. And it's been 2 years for the actual war right now. And now when they look at the actual numbers, because just a couple of weeks ago, as you know, the new Minister of Immigration announced, now I'm getting into Canadian politics, so I should be careful, announced the new immigration levels. She actually decided to put the Sudanese people within the Canadian immigration levels, even though it's a humanitarian case. They're not immigrating here. I'm going to tell you guys this right now. None of these people are choosing to come here by choice. It's just a place that they need to go to actually leave a war zone. It should have been an actual refugee case. They should have just sent a couple of planes to bring Sudanese people to Canada here, the same way as Ukrainians. More than 40,000 of them arrived here within the first 10 days. 10 days of the actual war itself. And to add even more to it, we know of cases of Canadian-born Sudanese boys and girls, more than 100 of them, who are now stuck in Sudan because they have no Canadian parents to bring them here. One of them has lost his life in an IDP camp. He drowned while literally the Canadian government is just basically pulling, like just slow walking the process of bringing a Canadian child to Canada because his mother is not Canadian and his father has been killed in the actual war itself. Another one of these children, we lost contact with him. We don't know where he is, even though his paperwork is ready and he's now, he's supposed to be brought here. He's from the western part of Sudan, honestly presumed dead at this moment, him and his mother as well. So honestly, I can't really say much. If you have an MP, if you can speak to them, tell them that this is not right. It's not accurate. We cannot just move past human lives just because Canada is going through a financial difficulty. The value of people is worth more than money to us. That's what we've been lied to and told about this country. It should be the case. We want that lie to stick. If it was a lie, we want it to stick until we bring our people. We can't just go back and forth on these cases. I'll stop here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Everything that I have said here, it is strictly my opinion. The Islamic Institute of Toronto has nothing to do with it. Okay? Allah yahfazkum ya Rabb, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah, Shaikh Abdullah and Shaikh Mamoun, for a very insightful session today. I always say that when you hear about the atrocities around the world, we relate to Gaza, we relate to Sudan, but it's when you actually hear these accounts. I tell my children, if you want to truly understand Islam, pick up a book on Sirah and read about the Rasul ﷺ and read his entire life, and then you get a better insight into the religion. Likewise, when you want to feel what's happening around the world, it's sessions like these that open your eyes and let you know exactly what's happening. You hear stuff in the media, but it's stuff that's scattered, it's different opinions. But what Shaykh Abdullah and what Shaykh Mamoun have conveyed here today, hopefully that's brought some, opened our eyes to what's happening, at least in Sudan. For me, I wanted to share, just on a humorous side, Sudan I've known all my life, but when I bought a map in 2010, a world map, just near the end, about December 2010. And was a map that I put up on the wall to share with my children. And we like to play competition with capitals, world capitals. And just 6 months after, I found out that my map got outdated because Sudan split into Sudan and South Sudan. So that's when I started to pay some interest. What just happened? And with all the conflict that happened, and since then, for almost the past 15 years, I've been very invested in understanding what's the conflict that's been happening there. And a lot of South Sudan, for example, is very Christian dominated. North Sudan is what's going through a lot of conflict. So inshallah, I'll encourage that you continue to attend sessions that enlighten us, and continue to read up about what's happening around the world and understand the deep history of Palestine, of Sudan, Yemen, a lot of places around the world where there's a lot of injustice and atrocities. Once again, I do want to thank the Shaykh, and I want to thank all of you for attending. We have some tea and biscuits at the back, and inshallah we'll be calling the adhan for Isha. Jazakallah, wassalamu alaikum.